Hey everybody, welcome back to Horror Trans. My name is Stephanie Bree. I'm a transgender woman, and I talk about all things horror. And today this is my second attempt of doing a review of Dreamscape. Because I fell asleep the first time I watched this movie, and that was no fault of the movie, let me point that out. It was just the third movie I watched that night, and it was like 3 o'clock in the morning, and my brain was like, we're done, we're tapping out, let's go. Bedtime. So I gave it a second chance. There are movies that I cannot talk about without spoiling the fuck out of the movie. And there are movies that, I can dance around the spoilery parts and give you the, just enough to say, yeah, let's go. This is one of those movies I can't really tell you really anything about it without spoiling anything or everything. It's that kind of movie because it's one of those, it's not what you expect, and it goes places you didn't know it was going to go. And it does things that you were like, okay, that's a decision. So I'm going to talk about the positives. And the biggest positive is it does explore dreams really well, which I love because, the Nightmare on Elm Street movies are my favorite horror movies. I love dreams. And it has some amazing special effects and visual photography and visual effects and dream sequences, and I hesitate to say virtual reality, but computer-assisted dream imagery, I guess. Or maybe technology-assisted dream. I don't know. Like I said, it's really hard to talk about without spoiling it. But it's a pretty intense thrill ride. Like, from jump. Like, the moment... This is one of those rare movies, you know how people say the movie started and it didn't stop until the credits? That's this movie. It basically started and it didn't stop until the credits. Sometimes I want to give you the juicy bits so you know what you're getting into. Sometimes I want to give you the content warning so you're like, well, maybe I don't want to experience that. I really don't want to do that with this movie because I went into it totally blind. I knew nothing about this movie other than I'd seen the poster, because it's kind of a meme, and I hadn't even seen the trailer. I just had seen people talk about it, and I assumed it was a Nightmare on Elm Street ripoff, which it ain't, technically, but also kind of almost, in a roundabout way, almost is. Kinda. But not really. I know that's not a very fair review. Like I said, the special effects, the visual effects, top fucking notch. Gorgeous looking movie. Visuals that are going to stick in your brain. The plot, I can't really talk about. Again, without spoiling it, because there's some stuff in the plot that's going to make you go, you just got to, this is when you got to pay attention to. Just kind of like with Sleepaway Camp, you just have to take my word for it. This is a movie you just have to watch blind with as little information as possible going in if you really want to appreciate it. Because if I tell you what this movie is, you're going to be like, oh, maybe not for me. Now, this movie has nothing to do with society, but it's that kind of movie where if you know what's happening before you go into the movie, you're not shocked at all. When it happens, you're just like, oh, well, that's not what I pictured, but okay. But if you go into totally blind, you're like, what the fuck am I watching? That's how you need to go into Dreamscape. Is it a good movie? I'm going to cop out. I've never done this before, but I'm going to say you decide. Because I can't make up my mind. I cannot decide if I like this movie or not. I fell asleep the first time I watched it, which again, not a mark against the movie. The second time I watched it, I was like, well, this isn't what I thought was going on. But also, like, and I know this is not Nightmare on Elm Street, but I am so obsessed with Nightmare on Elm Street, they did the Dream stuff better, in my opinion. Especially Dream Warriors and the Dream Child. I don't know. It's kind of like if you watch Star Trek and you fall in love with Star Trek and you understand Star Trek, you go into, future Star Treks and you're like, yeah, this is good stuff. And then you discover Star Wars and your brain is blown away and you're like, whoa, what have I been fucking missing out on? But if you watch Star Wars first and you're like, your mind is blown, and then you try to get into Star Trek, your brain is like, no thanks, this is lackluster, this doesn't do it for me, give me more Star Wars, you can have Star Trek. That's what this is. If you watch A Nightmare on Elm Street before you watch Dreamscape, I don't know if Dreamscape is going to do it for you. But if you watch Dreamscape totally blind, and you've never seen A Nightmare on Elm Street, then maybe this movie has something going for it. I love dreams, and I love visuals and nightmare stuff. And Hellraiser is another one that's not really Nightmare on Elm Street, but it is and it isn't. And I love the Hellraiser movies. Well, the first 4, anyways. They're the only. Anyways, moving on. So I can't give this one a recommendation. This is the first movie I've ever reviewed, I think, where I cannot give it an official recommendation. My recommendation is, if you decide to watch this movie, go in totally blind, or as blind as you can, and be prepared to, see things that are going to stick with you, and see things that are going to make you go, what in the fuck is this? Not all of it in a good way. Am I gonna watch it again? I doubt it. I just don't know if I personally need to revisit this movie. For me, once was enough. But because I fell asleep, I had to watch it twice, just so I could do the review. I have friends, and I'm going to be honest with you, they're older than me, so that might be a generation gap, who sing this movie's praises all day long. And I have friends who said this was the most boring fucking thing they've ever seen in their life. So, I can't really do you better than that. And I know that's not a good review, which I don't really review movies, I just recommend them. Basically, my recommendations are, should you watch it, or should you rent it, or should you buy it? That's my recommendation, usually. Honestly, I just don't know how I feel about this movie. I'm leaning towards, if I had to give it a recommendation, I'm leaning towards a buy, just because you're good. This one, I'll say this. This one takes multiple views. You're not going to be able to absorb this movie in one viewing. You're not. This one's going to take multiple viewings just to figure out what the fuck is going on and what's happening and why and everything else. And it's not even overly complex, really. It's just kind of bizarre, if that makes sense. So that's my recommendation. If you have to watch it, do so. And if you enjoy it and it clicks with you, then yeah, you're going to want to buy it. But I don't know. Yeah, fuck it. Buy this one, I guess.